Hi, in today's video I want to look at 4 questions I often get asked about people's piano practicing. Question number 1, should I use the metronome, and if so, how? Well, a metronome can be extremely useful in our piano practicing. It's not always appropriate. There are some pieces that are designed to have flexibility and rubato, and while I'd encourage you to learn those first with a fairly steady beat and then add the rubato in later, they might be slightly less suitable for metronome work. But let me show you where a metronome can be useful. It can be a great tool for ensuring you've got a consistent speed through a piece. Now, you might use it by setting it up at the beginning of the piece and leaving it on for the whole of the piece. But another way which you might want to try is just checking different sections. So for example, if I think of this Mozart sonata movement, there's my beat. I'm going to set that on my metronome here. A little bit steadier. I'm just going to play the opening. And now I'm going to keep the metronome at the same speed, but I'm going to try the second subject. And I often find pupils slow down for the second subject. So you can use the metronome on one section and then on a different section and maybe on another section, just to make sure those different parts of the piece are all at the same tempo. That's one use of the metronome. Another really helpful way to use the metronome is in slow practice and gradually increasing the speed. So if I think of this section from the same piece, the same sonata, I want to do that in slow practice. I'm going to do it slowly. But I'd probably do it even slower than that actually, to start with. Then so on. And when I feel that's secure, and that may be a few practice sessions, I'll increase the metronome a bit. And if that's secure, increase it a little bit more, and so on. If at any point it doesn't feel secure, do some more work at that metronome speed, or even slow the metronome down a little bit. So there's a couple of uses of the metronome. Next question, should I be doing more practice hands separate? And the answer almost certainly is yes. There are a few places where separate work is perhaps not quite so useful. For example, the Bach Prelude in C, number 1 from the Well-Tempered Clavier. The pattern very much alternates flows from one hand to the other. So that might not be a particularly useful part for practicing separately. But most music, the hands are doing quite different things. It can be really useful. Let's think of this little bit from the Pathetique sonata. Doing the left hand. And I can make sure those arpeggios are really even. They're being played piano, and the hand is as relaxed as possible, and the fingering is secure. When I'm doing it hands together, I might not be able to focus much on that because I'm thinking more about what the left hand does. And for most pieces of music, I would encourage you to get hands separate, as confident as possible, almost from memory, before you start trying it together. You may just do that on a section at a time. You don't have to do the whole piece hands separate. In fact, I'd encourage you to do sections at a time. So yes, do lots of hand separate practice, especially when you're first learning a piece or when you encounter any technical difficulties, unless it's a piece of music where the patterns are flowing between the hands. Question 3, should I be doing more slow practice? Well, again, the answer is almost certainly yes. Slow practice is such a useful tool, and I don't think any of us really do enough of it. However, when you're doing slow practice, the fingers are moving slowly, the brain is working quickly. Let me go back to that Pathetique sonata. If I'm doing slow practice, but I'm thinking about my shopping list or what I'm going to have for lunch, and I'm not really listening or focusing, I'm not going to gain much. I need to be really focused and listening with absolute precision. Now, when I do my slow practice, I'm working on every detail. Is the articulation exactly as I want? Is the fingering exactly correct? The dynamics, the expression, is the coordination of the hands, the rhythm's really secure. Listen very carefully and get everything absolutely precise, and then when you speed it up, it will come together much better. One thing about slow practice is to make sure when you do slow practice, you are doing a slow version of the fast version. So what I mean by that is sometimes there is a certain fingering that works when you do it slowly. So for example, in the right hand, I can maybe be swapping fingers on the note when I do it slowly, but I can't do that up to tempo. So don't do that when you do it slowly. Make sure the fingering you use will work at the final tempo, and then use that fingering in your slow practice. So we've talked about metronome, hand separate, and slow practice. Next question, how do I memorise music? Right, one thing I would say is when you perform a piece of music, even if you've got sheet music on the stand, a lot of it will be memory. If it's not going to be performance ready, it won't feel secure. You cannot be reading and processing every note when you're performing and playing a piece relatively fluently. That's why a performance is always much more polished, or should be much more polished than a sight reading version. So even if the music's on the stand, you are already memorising quite a lot. And the other thing I would say is don't feel obliged to play pieces without any music. Sometimes I've noticed that people will play without the music, but they're so worried about the memorisation, losing their place and not knowing what they're doing, that they then don't interpret the music as beautifully as they could, or other insecurities come in because they're so worked up about the memorisation. So there's nothing wrong with having the music there if you need to. But it is a really good skill to develop memorisation, and it does show that you know the music really well. What I would encourage you to do is memorise in small sections. So each day you might take 2 bars or 4 bars and try to memorise it. Start with the music in front of you, play it through a few times. Maybe keep the music there, but deliberately don't look at it quite as much. Maybe move the music a bit further away, so you could have a quick glance if you lost your memory, but again, you're less likely to look at it, and eventually weaning yourself off the music altogether for those 4 bars. Now, what you could also do is you could then practice some other things and say about 10 minutes, quarter hour, 20 minutes. Go back to that and see if it's still in the memory. So you're testing, can I remember it after 10, 15 minutes? And then you could maybe come back to it later in the day and check it again. So you're building that memorisation skill. Another useful tip about memorisation is to see if you can memorise the music away from the piano. When we're playing the piano, a lot of it is muscle memory. But if we rely completely on muscle memory, we only need to play one wrong fingering and the muscle memory can fall apart. So can you think through in your head, without being at a piano, can you think through and memorise the music? That's a really useful check, I find. So with memorisation, work on small bits at a time. Think about checking it after different time intervals, 10 minutes, 15, 20, and so on. Also look for patterns and repetitions. So, if I've learnt this bit from memory, I may also have learnt this section because it's actually the same. And the final thing I would say about memorisation is it's a skill that you will develop. So if you do a little bit of memorisation each day, you will find your memory of music will improve over time. So there are 4 common questions: metronome work, hand separate, slow practice, and memorisation. Maybe you've got other questions, or maybe you'd like to look at any of those areas in more detail. And on Thursday the 23rd of July at 1 p.m, I'm going to be holding an online piano practice clinic. I'd love for you to join me, and this is a great opportunity if you just ask me any questions you want. You can submit these in advance, or you can even bring them to the workshop, I don't mind. And I'll enjoy looking at those areas with you, and hopefully we can all learn a bit from each other. So I'll put details of that in the description of this video. Thank you for watching, and do leave any comments and thoughts you have.